Hi, my name is Mark Hefner. I'm the training coordinator here with the John Stone Supply Training Center, and today we're going to talk about how to do proper flaring. With the increased popularity of mini-split systems, we're going to see more flared-on fittings. This is due in part to the fact that they allow less contaminants into the system. Anytime we braze on a system, we're going to allow oxidation on the copper or other things to get in there. We don't avoid that, especially with these, as they're TEVs. There's more sensitive components in that. And if we have a flared on fitting instead, we can keep everything cleaner, avoid excess copper, avoid that oxidation again, and even have a little bit faster install in some cases. Well, proper flaring will ensure you don't have a leak. There are products available that may help with that. Most notably Nylog and Flare Tight. There's like a rubber gasket you can get to add onto these. These may help depending on your installation, but check with the manufacturer and your install guide to know whether or not they would be necessary. So these are 3 examples of flaring kits we're going to go through today. This is probably the most common flaring and swage kit by Yellow Jacket, of course. We're also going to look at RectorSeal's drill flaring kit, and there is also Yellow Jacket's 45-degree flaring and swage kit here. These are all just different ways, different tools you might have. This one being the most common, of course, but I'm going to go through how you would use each and apply it for our Fujitsu mini split system. Our 3/8 piece of copper, this is what we're going to attach to our Fujitsu head. The very first thing I did was just make sure I had a really clean cut on here. Make sure it's nice and level, and make sure you don't pinch the pipe or make it oblong or anything. It won't fit your flare properly then. We'll take our deburring tool, get our copper facing down, and deburr this copper and get it set up properly. You can see some of that copper material falling out of there. Yeah, we want it to stay out of the pipe, of course. And now that looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and fit this into our flaring tool here. This is a little bit finicky because you have to make sure you have just the right amount of copper sticking out. You want it to basically be level with the top bar here so it has room to flare that copper out evenly. So I'm actually going to pull that back just a little bit more. Even a little more than that. I'll crimp that into here. And now before we really start anything else, we'll put just a drop of clean refrigerant oil on here. That'll help with the flare. We'll attach our tool and line it all up. And this is the easy part. Once you get it clamped in there, just start cranking on it, of course. If you are hooked into an actual line set, you might need some help to make sure you don't bend your line set. It does help to have an extra set of hands sometimes. You get that all the way snug down, and then we'll be able to open this back up. We should have a pretty clean flare.
Hi, this is Mark after the fact. I'd like to point out I made a mistake here. I forgot to put the flare net on before I actually did the flare. Don't be me. Put the flare net on.
So actually, if we look at that, we can see that this flare started to split. So I'm actually going to do a couple more of these off camera till I get one that doesn't do that. But that would be the process you'd go through to get a proper flare on you. So I took a couple more tries, but I was able to get a clean flare with this flaring tool finally. This is probably the most frustrating flaring tool for me. A lot of guys, including myself, can have a little bit of a difficult time using these. But with some practice, getting used to them, you'll see this is what your flare should end up looking like. Right, now we're going to use RectorSeal's flare drill bit. I like these. They're really easy to use. As before, you do need to cut and deburr your pipe still. You do not, however, apply oil to these fittings. These rely on the friction and heat generated by the drill to get them to flare out properly. Put your flare net on and make sure you go on really straight with your drill. You don't want to come at it at an angle at all, and you'll push decently hard and it'll heat that copper and flare it out here. And just like that, you have a pretty good flare fitting. You can see it'll actually fit nicely into our nut. As before, we're using 3/8 copper pipe. We'll have to have a clean cut, have deburred it, put our flare nut on, add a little bit of oil, and now we can use our Yellow Jacket 45-degree flaring tool. This one's really nice and easy to use. You can set it to the proper dimension for your pipe. It actually has a stopper built into it so you don't put too much copper in. You close it up, clamp it down, and then simply go ahead and flare it. There we go. That should be good. Open her back up. Come on. There we go. And now we should have a really good, really clean flare on the first try. And that'll fit perfectly into our flare net. Right, so now we have our Fujitsu head. We're gonna actually attach our flare fitting to this. I printed the install manual for Fujitsu here, which tells us that a 3/8 fitting like this would require 23.6 pounds of foot torque up to 30 pounds of foot torque. So I've taken our torque wrench here and set it for 23.6. We're gonna go ahead and install our flare fitting here. And we'll get both wrenches on here. And we should be able to just lock in 23.6, and that would be a proper install for your flared fitting. Now that we've understood the proper flaring technique and how to properly torque our fittings, there's one other thing we wanted to mention, is that you can get braze-on flare fittings. We'd like to avoid this because, again, that offers the opportunity for contaminants to get into the system. The manufacturer wants you to use the fittings that they supplied. For this and any other training, come check us out at the JSOG Training Center, where you get real-world experience for your real-world career.